stop. He takes Jesus to the highest place and shows him all the kingdoms of the world, and he promises to give it to him as long as you bow down and worship me. The temptation here is a temptation for Jesus to accomplish the grand purpose of what he set out to do, place everything under his authority and establish his own kingdom, but not through the cross, by some other means. Now, I just want you to imagine what that temptation is. To establish his own reign of righteousness and peace. Imagine no atom bombs, no concentration camps, no terrorism, no war, no famine, no hunger, no starvation, no violence of any kind. Everything would be established just as Jesus would want it to be established. As long as he bows down before Satan and worships him. See, the devil isn't interested in moving people away from God for the purpose of issuing their own freedom and their own independence or any of that. The issue is worship. Bob Dylan wrote a song that said, everybody's got to serve somebody. What's at stake is who will Jesus serve? Again, this is why temptation is spiritual in nature, because it deals with the fundamental nature of the God that we choose to worship. So as before, Jesus remains faithful. Just like Israel wasn't faithful and decided, let's create a whole new golden calf and start worshiping that. Let's take on the gods of all the other nations and start worshiping them. They weren't faithful to God. Jesus remains faithful. And again, he quotes from Moses. It's written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Interestingly, Jesus quotes the passage of Scripture where we find the Shema, which is the Jewish creed. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord, and you shall worship the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. And after that it says, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Take your oath in his name. As temptation is at its root about worship, something that we offer to God, Jesus goes to the root of his faith, which is about worshiping God and following God only. Maybe the next time that we feel tempted, we should recite the creed. Maybe next time you feel tempted, we should take a step back and say, I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, my Lord. Right? Because that's the point. Are we going to use that time and go closer to God and Jesus, or won't we? The last temptation that the devil offers is really a continuation of the first two. There's a rabbinical tradition that says that the Messiah would appear on top of the temple. So the devil goes to Jesus and says, hey guy, do it. Prove yourself. And there's a little bit of a niggling point there, right? There's a little bit of a poking at him. If you are the Son of God, prove it. If you really are who you say you are. Prove your divine sonship. Prove that you are the Messiah. Prove that you are the one to be worshipped and glorified. Prove that you are who you say you are, but not through the cross. Through your own self-gratifying means. And again, Jesus rests upon the words of Scripture and the root of his faith. Do not put the Lord your God to the test. See, but in many ways, the force of that reading, the force of our gospel reading, isn't about the three temptations. In many ways, the three temptations are just kind of the preamble. It's about verse 13. When the devil had finished all his tempting, he left him. See, Jesus wins. Where everybody else fails, Jesus reigns. Where everybody else succumbs to the temptations, well, the history of Israel, where they, even in the midst of their good times, with their own self-mastery and their own will, sometimes they got it right. Many times they didn't. Jesus always got it right. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 15 says, Jesus was tempted just as we are, but was without sin. He's the one with all the authority and all the power to thwart all the temptations of the evil one. And so in him, we find our salvation. Lent is a time where we look at some of the more uncomfortable topics of our spiritual life. And really, we look at the places maybe of our failures of our spiritual life. If we look at our track record of temptation, how is our track records? I'm sure if you look back, there will be times where you can say, man, I mastered that one. I felt tempted there, but I got through it and I chose the right thing. If you're like me, there's going to be a whole lot of times where you say, didn't pass that one. Kind of failed with that one. We look at all those times, and then we sit uncomfortably with those times. But Lent is a time, and this reading doesn't show us about a process of overcoming temptation. It's not showing us a strategy. It doesn't show us a plan of what to say or how to act. As long as we execute these 3 points fundamentally in order, then no matter what, we're going to be able to resist temptation. That's not what it's about. Rather, it doesn't show us a plan, it shows us a person that we turn to. When temptation rears its ugly head, as it will time and time again, when we feel that we are at a loss of what to do or what to say, when we feel kind of conflicted between do we choose this or that, this kind of gives us what I want. Over here is a path that leads closer to God. We're called to turn to him. We turn to the one who not only understands what it's like to be in that place, but the one who has the power to help us overcome it. And so temptation then is stripped of all its power. And then that wilderness time for us becomes a time where we move closer to the Lord of our salvation. May each of us rest more fully and more deeply on the presence of Christ with us, particularly in those times where we feel tempted or at a loss. May we hold on to him